In the quiet, windswept marshes of the Low Countries, far from the gilded courts of Paris or the ancient marble of Rome, a new kind of power was quietly taking root during the 16th century. It did not begin with a crown, nor did it start with the divine right of kings, but rather with a profound sense of defiance against the most formidable empire on earth. The House of Orange-Nassau emerged not as a traditional monarchy, but as a family of opportunists and visionaries who realized that the future of sovereignty would be written in ledgers as much as in blood. At a time when Europe was defined by rigid feudal hierarchies, this house understood a fundamental shift in the wind. They saw that the true currency of the coming age would not be land alone, but the flow of global trade and the unprecedented ability to mobilize capital. The story begins with William the Silent, a man who inherited a title from a French principality he would rarely visit, yet whose destiny became inseparable from the soggy soil of the Netherlands. William was a master of the middle ground, a diplomat who understood that the Spanish crown, led by the zealous Philip II, was strangling the economic lifeblood of the Dutch provinces. The tension was not merely religious or political, it was existential. Spain demanded absolute obedience and heavy taxation to fund its global crusades, while the Dutch merchants demanded the freedom to innovate. When William turned his back on the Spanish court, he was not just leading a rebellion, he was staking the survival of his house on the radical idea that a nation could be managed like a venture. As the fires of the 80 Years' War began to consume the landscape, the House of Orange faced a desperate mathematical reality. They were a small, fragmented collection of provinces standing against the wealth of the New World and the might of the Spanish tercios. Traditional warfare was a luxury they could not afford. To survive, they had to reinvent the way a state pays for its survival. Under the guidance of the Princes of Orange, the Dutch began to pioneer the concept of public debt, creating a system where the citizens themselves invested in the war effort. This was the birth of the bond market, a mechanism that allowed a small rebel state to outspend an empire by leveraging the collective trust of its people. The conflict forced a marriage of convenience between the aristocratic military prestige of the House of Orange and the cold, calculating logic of the Amsterdam merchant class. It was a friction-filled relationship, yet it birthed the most sophisticated economic engine the world had ever seen. While the Spanish relied on the arrival of silver fleets from the Americas, the Dutch, under the strategic umbrella of the Orange family, created the United East India Company. This was the first true multinational corporation, a private entity granted the powers of a state, including the right to wage war, build forts, and strike treaties. The House of Orange did not merely lead an army, they provided the stability required for the first stock exchange to flourish, turning the volatility of the sea into a tradable commodity. The escalation of this power reached a fever pitch under Maurice of Nassau, a man who treated the battlefield like a geometric proof. Maurice realized that the chaotic, knightly charges of the past were obsolete. He introduced a rigorous, professionalized drill system that transformed common citizens into a synchronized machine. This military revolution was expensive, requiring a constant stream of revenue that only a thriving commercial empire could provide. By professionalizing the army, the House of Orange ensured that the merchant ships could return safely to harbor, and by ensuring those ships returned, they guaranteed the capital needed to pay the soldiers. It was a closed loop of power and profit that slowly drained the coffers of the Spanish Empire. However, the House of Orange was never a simple monarchy, and their path was marked by a constant, simmering tension with the very republic they helped create. They were Stadtholders, a title that implied stewardship rather than ownership, yet they carried the weight of kings. This ambiguity was their greatest strength and their most persistent shadow. In the mid-17th century, During the era of the great Stadtholder, Frederick Henry, the house transformed The Hague into a center of European diplomacy. They were no longer just rebels. They were the brokers of a new world order, using their vast wealth to marry into the royal houses of Europe, including the Stuarts of England. The narrative reached its most audacious peak with William III, a man whose sickly frame belied a relentless, icy ambition. By the late 1600s, the Dutch Republic was the wealthiest corner of the globe, but it was physically threatened by the expansionist Sun King, Louis XIV. William realized that the survival of the House of Orange and the Dutch way of life required a grander stage. In 1688, he orchestrated what history records as the Glorious Revolution, a calculated invasion of England that was financed by Dutch bankers and supported by the English aristocracy. This was not a conquest in the traditional sense, but a corporate merger of two nations. When William took the English throne, he brought with him the financial DNA of the House of Orange. He oversaw the establishment of the Bank of England, an institution modeled directly on the successful financial structures of Amsterdam. He imported the Dutch system of national debt and the concept of a constitutional monarchy, where the ruler's power was tempered by the needs of the financial elite. This transfer of knowledge changed the trajectory of global history, shifting the center of financial gravity from Amsterdam to London and laying the groundwork for the British Empire. The House of Orange had successfully exported their model of capitalism to the very nation that would one day dominate the globe. Yet, this rise was fueled by a relentless pragmatism that often bordered on the cold-blooded. The House of Orange understood that in the world of global trade, there are no permanent friends, only permanent interests. They navigated a world of shifting alliances, often sacrificing the internal stability of the Dutch Republic to maintain their standing on the European stage. The rivalry between the Orangists, who favored the central authority of the prince, and the Republicans, who favored the autonomy of the merchant regents, led to moments of dark, internal violence. The most harrowing of these was the collapse of the De Witt brothers, the political rivals of the Orange family, whose brutal end signaled the absolute consolidation of William III's power. As the 18th century dawned, the Dutch Golden Age began to lose its luster, eclipsed by the very systems they had helped cultivate in England. The House of Orange, once the vanguard of a radical new economy, began to settle into the familiar comforts of established royalty. The revolutionary energy that had fueled the rebellion against Spain was replaced by a conservative desire to maintain the status quo. The family that had invented the modern world now found itself struggling to adapt to the new forces of the Enlightenment and the rising tide of popular revolution. The ultimate irony of the House of Orange is that they were the architects of a system that would eventually outgrow the need for princes. By creating a world governed by markets, contracts, and the rule of law, they built a structure where the individual whim of a ruler became secondary to the movement of the ticker tape. They transformed the nature of power from a static possession of the land into a fluid, invisible force that could cross borders and oceans in an instant. Reflecting on their legacy, we see a dynasty that acted as the midwives of the modern era. They did not just win a war for independence, they provided the blueprint for how a modern state functions, proving that a nation's strength is measured not by the size of its borders, but by the depth of its credit and the reach of its commerce. The House of Orange-Nassau began as a family of high-stakes gamblers in a world of kings, and they ended by creating a world where the gamblers would eventually become the kings themselves. The shift from the Dutch Golden Age to the 18th century marked a period of quiet, structural erosion. While the palaces of the House of Orange grew more opulent, the Republic itself began to sag under the weight of its own success. The financial systems that William III had exported to London were now being used against the Dutch. The British, once the junior partners in this maritime venture, had begun to utilize their larger landmass and deeper population pool to build a navy that the Dutch provinces could no longer afford to outpace. For the Orange dynasty, the challenge was no longer one of creation, but of preservation. They were caught in a trap of their own making, where the very capitalism they pioneered demanded a scale that their small, marshy corner of Europe simply could not sustain. Internal divisions within the Netherlands began to fester as the gap widened between the ruling elite and the common citizenry. The Stadtholder, once a symbol of national liberation, was increasingly viewed by the patriot movement as a relic of a bygone era, an autocrat dressed in the robes of a republican. When the French Revolution finally spilled across the borders in the late 1790s, the House of Orange found itself facing the same existential threat it had once posed to the Spanish. William V was forced to flee to England, leaving behind a nation that was quickly absorbed into the Napoleonic machine. It appeared, for a brief moment in history, that the story of the Orange-Nassau line had reached its final, silent chapter. Yet, the dynasty possessed a remarkable capacity for reinvention. Following the collapse of Napoleon's empire, the family returned not as stadtholders, but as kings. The Congress of Vienna sought to create a strong buffer state against France, and in 1815, William I was crowned King of the United Netherlands. This was a fundamental transformation. The family had transitioned from being the first among equals in a merchant republic to becoming a traditional European monarchy. However, the old Dutch instincts for industry and finance remained. William I became known as the King Merchant, throwing his personal fortune and the power of the state into the construction of canals, the founding of national banks, and the industrialization of the southern provinces. The 19th century saw the House of Orange navigating the treacherous waters of rising nationalism and the demand for constitutional reform. They learned that to keep the crown, they had to yield the scepter. In 1848, as revolutions toppled monarchies across the continent, King William II made the strategic decision to accept a new constitution that stripped the monarchy of its absolute power, transforming the Netherlands into a parliamentary democracy. It was a move of survival that mirrored the pragmatic flexibility of their ancestors. By stepping back from day-to-day governance, the House of Orange ensured their permanence as a unifying symbol of the nation, a golden thread connecting the modern state to its revolutionary, mercantile origins. Through the 20th century, the dynasty faced its greatest trials during the dark years of global conflict. When the Netherlands was occupied during the Second World War, Queen Wilhelmina became the voice of the resistance from her exile in London. Her radio broadcasts provided a psychological lifeline to a population under the heel of oppression. This era redefined the family's relationship with the people. They were no longer just the architects of financial systems or the commanders of armies. They had become the guardians of the national identity. The House of Orange had evolved from a venture capital firm in the 16th century into the emotional soul of a modern democracy in the 20th. The legacy of the Orange-Nassau family is etched into the very fabric of the world we inhabit today. Every time a stock is traded on an exchange, every time a government issues a bond to fund its future, and every time a multinational corporation operates across borders, the echoes of the Dutch Golden Age are present. They were the first to understand that power is most effective when it is decentralized, monetized, and tied to the collective interest of a trading class. They proved that a small group of people, armed with little more than a vision of commerce and a willingness to innovate, could dismantle the old world of empires and build a new world of markets. When we look back at the House of Orange, We do not see a family of typical conquerors. They did not seek to paint the map with their colors through sheer territorial hunger. Instead, they sought to control the flow of the world's wealth, creating a template for the modern state that nearly every nation on Earth eventually adopted. Their story is a reminder that the most enduring revolutions are often those that take place in the ledger books and the bank vaults. The House of Orange-Nassau did not just lead a nation, they authored the operating system of the modern West, a system of risk, reward, and the relentless pursuit of growth that continues to shape our lives centuries after the first Dutch ships vanished over the horizon.